jacket, right? Let's think about it. What are some of the things that go into creating a jacket? What do you need to create a jacket? Here there's a company like Uniqlo, right? That creates jackets, that creates all kinds of things, right? Or Beijing, right? It creates all kinds of jackets, right? So what goes into this? Well, let's think about it. Minsu, what do you need to create a jacket? So you need designers, right? You need a design, right? Okay, so that's good. Let's just list a bunch of these out, right? So you need a design. Okay? So that's important, right? Somebody has to come up with the design. Someone has to come up with a concept. You guys remember the word concept, right? Concept is an idea. And Akio, you can feel free to take notes, or if you have any questions at any time, just ask me at any time, okay? So what are some other things? Shin, what are some other things that go into creating a jacket?
In a big company, in a big
anything.
Workforce.
You need labor.
Yeah, labor.
Right? So you need labor. Right? Labor, everyone understands Minsu. Akio, do you understand the word labor? Yep. You understand what it means, right? It's people, right? There's all kinds of labor. Technically, design is actually a part of labor. But, so let's talk about that for a second, right? There's a lot of different types of people. When you think about a company, right, a fashion company, let's say, that designs clothes, right, or in this case, a sweater. There's a lot of different types of labor, right? So let's come up with all the different types of labor that there are. What are some examples? Pedro, when you think about it, right? What's the most obvious one? What's the most obvious example of labor, right? That's part of a company that creates jackets.
Well, I was going to say designers because they're the ones who make it.
But that's just one. The designers are the ones who come up with the idea. So what's the next most obvious example of labor?
People.
Right, but people,
but I don't know the word.
But people who do what?
Who do the clothes, the material,
The sewing,
right?
The sewing, right? The stitching, right? So there's people in factories, right, who do this stuff. So let's just call them, let's call them garment workers. Right? So garment workers. Garment is a word for apparel, right? It's probably a word that you guys have seen before, garment. So garment workers are the people who are in the factories, right? Now, who owns the factory? The company, right? Akio, would you agree that the company that's creating the jacket owns the factory, normally speaking, right? They own the factory where the jacket is being created. So that's another example of something, isn't it? Of a cost item, right? Because you have to buy the factory, right? Or you're leasing the factory, right? So let's write that one down. That's a big one. This is actually a pretty important cost, but we'll break this one down as well. So you have your garment workers.
Would that be a manufacturer company?
Yeah. Right? So all companies, right, like Uniqlo or like H&M, right, they create their own sweaters or jackets, all of their apparel, right? So they have to own everything. They don't just design it, right? There are people who work just as designers, right? They get hired, right, to work for these companies, or like they create their own designs, and then people, they license their ideas, right? But in this case, we're talking about a company, right? A company creates this jacket, right? And when a company does it, they generally own everything, the entire process, the entire creation process, right? So we have two types of worker here. We have design, we have the garment workers, and we have designers, right? And these two really work really closely together, right? Because the designers are creating the concept, the idea, right? And then you have Pedro. Which format?
Oh, I was gonna.
No.
Oh, in the notes.
Oh, you don't have a
no, I use my notes.
Oh, okay, that's fine. That's cool. So the thing is that the designers and the garment workers work pretty closely together, right? What are some other examples of labor that goes into not just, don't just think about the creation of the sweater itself, right? When you think about a company, right, what do you think of?
Marketing.
Yeah, so that's an example, right? That's an example of people who work for the company, right? It's not just, right? For instance, Shin, right? You worked with Agent, right? And you work in accounting, right, / finance. That's really different from the garment workers in China or anywhere else, or the designers, right? So there's offices, right? Companies have offices, right? So that's a big one as well. Office. And who works in offices? Regular employees, right?
Yeah.
You have employees. That's what you call it, office employees, right?
But some people they have their own lawyer.
Yeah, that's really, really important, right? So what are examples of, for instance, office employees, right? You have, each company has a legal department. Lawyers, right? That's a legal department, right? Companies, you have to write contracts, right? Companies have to, when you enter an agreement with another company, you have to have someone who writes contracts, right? Shinsuke, what's your department?
Finance.
Finance, right? So companies need to have finance and accounting, right? Finance and accounting, right? These are people who are basically keeping track of how much money is coming in, how much money are we spending, how much profit are we making, right? So there's people who have to deal with it. What are some other examples of people who work in an office place?
Human resource.
Yeah, so human resources, right? Human resources is kind of like, they're like the office administrative, right? They're like, it's a mixture of people who work as secretaries, right? People who basically do the administration work in the office. You said something a while ago. You said another group that's important for a fashion company, which was, think about it, you said it just like a minute ago. Purchasing, yeah. So that's important, but you said another one, right? I'll help you out. Marketing, right? All companies have marketing groups. Right? What do marketing people do? They advertise, right? They figure out, we've been talking about consumer psychology, right? We've been talking about advertisements that are put out, right? And so we think a lot about, they're the ones who decide, okay, if we're going to do an ad, if we're going to advertise during the World Cup, right? Do we want a famous soccer player to be wearing our brand of sweater or something, right? These are the people who decide, right, on all of that. And you also have people who are like in purchasing, right? That's another example, right? Purchasing is also important. Because they're the ones who work with the factories. They're the ones who work with the factories, right? And they try to figure out all of these things in terms of, not just buying the garments, right? Because you have to figure out, okay, which factory, where are we going to invest? How much are we going to pay the workers, right? So purchasing is also there. So these are just some examples. There's other departments as well. But here's another one, right? Well, we're forgetting one pretty important one, right?
Sales?
Well, sales is there. Sales is generally sales and marketing kind of work together. Like for when you have a big fashion company, right? They don't really have sales divisions, right? Because if the company wants to, how do I explain this? That's generally you're the CEO level people, right? They're basically the salespeople for the company. For instance, if you know how, so I don't know if this is like this in Korea, right? But in Japan, you guys have holding companies, right? Sumitomo, Mitsubishi, Itochu, right? These are big holding companies. So if Ralph Lauren can't directly go and sell clothes in Japan. They actually need to have an agreement with one of these holding companies, and then using them, right? That's how they get the ability to sell their clothes in Japan, right? So when you have, this is kind of a special situation. Normally you would think, even when you think of a startup company, right, which has 10 employees, usually it's the founder who goes to investors, right? and he tells them that this is our plan, this is what we're creating, this is the concept for our product, and here's an early prototype. Right? This is an early version of what it's like. So usually you don't have, that's a really good point about salespeople, right? But generally speaking, in this situation, the really executives, right, who are like, the CEOs, the CFOs, right? Those types of people are the ones who are doing the sales function. But in general, you would think that sales is a big part of it. You do have sales like when you're, for instance, if, I'll give you an example, okay? And this is, we're gonna, I'll hold off on this example for a little bit, but I'll explain how sales works and which situations there are there, right? So for instance, like you would have, if a department store, right, calls up Uniqlo, right, and says that we want to sell your clothes, or calls up Ralph Lauren and says we want to sell your clothes, we want to have an agreement with you guys that you sell it to us for this price, right, and then we'll sell it to the people who buy it, people like us if we go to the mall, right, we want to buy their clothes at a different price. So the idea is that that's a decision that's taken by the executives of the company, right, whether or not they want to do that deal. So they might reach out to someone, but then they're just going to say, please talk to our executives, and they're the ones who are going to decide. They might talk to finance and accounting and get an idea, okay, how much can we sell it to them for, right? How much profit do we make? But we'll get into that in a little bit. But we're forgetting a pretty big one, right? In this day and age, what do you use at the office every single day? Computers, right? IT. All companies have IT divisions, right? Especially if you have a website, right? Think about it. If you have a website, if people have trouble with their computers, the first thing that they do is they go running to IT help me. Something's wrong. The website isn't working. My internet's not working. So IT is a really, really big part of most companies nowadays, right? Before it was like IT didn't even exist 40, 50 years ago, right? Now it's like, can you even imagine a company without an IT division? Can you imagine a company without a website? I can't. I've never come across one. So these are examples of people who, these guys all basically work together, right? All of these guys who work in offices, they work together. So so we've really broken down the labor piece, right? We've really broken down the labor piece, right? But companies also have to invest. We talked about investing in the past, right? They have to buy factory floors, right? They have to hire workers to work in the factory, right? What do you have to put into the factory to make clothes? Facilities. You have to put in machinery, right? Machines, right? You have these belts where the clothes move, right? People are sewing. You need sewing machines. You need a lot of different types of machinery, right? So you're going to put in machinery. Machines, basically, right? So that's also big, because what are you going to do with a factory if there isn't like machines and things like that? So, and then here's another part, right? Most of the time, most big companies that create garments, right? That create any type of apparel. American, hang on one second. Let's say an American company or a European company, right? Let's say H&M, right? Do you think H&M gets where does H&M sell their products? Where in the world does H&M sell their products? All over the world, right? So that's an important point. And where does H&M make their clothes, usually? What type of countries do you think H&M actually makes their clothes? H&M is a Swedish company, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's one of them, right? So places like, and why do you think they manufacture clothes in places like Bangladesh or China?
Cheaper.
Because it's cheaper, right? Places like China, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Bangladesh, India, right? They're really cheap, right? And the work is really easy, right? You just take people, they just stand in line for 8 hours, they do the sewing, they do the stitching. It's pretty simple. All you have to do is teach them how to do it, right? So it's simple. So